Love your city, every back road, every alley, every pothole. Love your city, every back road. Come together, fight for your home.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Love Your City podcast. My name is Bob Dalton. In each episode, I interview people doing grassroots work in their communities. This episode is a little bit unique because every once in a while, I'll do a featured episode highlighting somebody that can give a bird's eye perspective on what's going on in society. This episode, I'm interviewing Heidi Johnson. She's the CEO and the founder of Charity Matters, which is a podcast and a platform highlighting organizations that are doing good work to help solve some of the problems that humanity is facing. Thank you so much for joining me and being on the Love Your City podcast.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Bob.
In the intro podcast that I shared on Love Your City, I shared a story where I would visit my dad about once a year, and he lived in California. I lived in Oregon. And I didn't get to spend much time with him, but there was this one phrase that I really picked up on every time that I spent time with him. He would always see something positive happening and he would say, "That's a good thing."
Love
and
that.
It was such an interesting thing for me to remember. But I feel like in a really strange, ironic way, I've modeled a lot of my work after that phrase, "That's a good thing," of being able to call out the good in society. And I want to start off by saying you're one of my personal heroes in this space of somebody who's done this really well. I think it's beautiful what you've been able to do and accomplish. Why has that been important to you? Telling stories that matter.
Well, first of all, I am Irish, so I'm a storyteller by nature. And I just grew up with stories and hearing stories. My dad's a storyteller, my grandfather. It's an Irish thing, I think. But more than that, I think when I lost my mom suddenly in a car accident in 2002 and ended up through a series of events, starting a nonprofit with a group of friends, spiritual care, I realized A, how hard this work is, and B, that no one was telling the stories of these people and who do this work. You know, the 1.6 million or 1.7 million nonprofits in the United States. And at the time, there was no CNN Heroes show. There was no People magazine, Heroes Amongst Us. There was none of that. And I actually wrote for the blog yesterday, "Where are heroes?" I literally wrote this yesterday. It just, when I was growing up, heroes were everywhere in the media. To your point, we were seeing them on our TV shows, even if it was, parents as heroes, of being the hero of their family, to the point of your dad pointing out this is a good thing. The Cosbys or the Brady Bunch or Roseanne, they were heroes for their family. We would see heroes in TV, in media and movies. And when I heard Top Gun was the top grossing film and it's an American movie and the hero, I just thought, it made me so happy. I thought the world needs to see them. And I have the privilege of telling their stories every week and meeting them every day for the past decade. Because heroes haven't gone away just because the media hasn't shown them. They're still there.
Yeah. And what led you, was there a moment in your life, you mentioned your parents, but was there a moment in your life where you were like, this is going to be something that I'm going to do, is tell the stories of people that are doing good work in the community? It's such a specific thing to
It's crazy, right? So I started this nonprofit with a group of friends in 2003. My parents' accident was in 2002. And I sleep like a crazy person. I sleep through earthquakes. I didn't hear my babies cry. I'm a crazy hard sleeper. And I had a dream that woke me up in the middle of the night in, I think it was 2009. And it was like a jolt, like a lightning bolt that got me out of bed. It was so real that I wrote a TV show about nonprofit founders. And it was so random. And I had been running this nonprofit for a few years and successfully. And I wrote it down. I just started writing in the middle of the night. I've never woke up in the middle of the night, literally in my life. Just do not do that. And so the next day I said to my husband, I think I'm going to call some friends in television, see how you write a TV show. And he's like, well, everything you've ever done, you didn't think you were going to start a nonprofit and you did that. So, doesn't surprise me. And so I did. And I figured out how to join the Writers Guild and I wrote it and I logged it and I registered and did the whole thing. And then I said, well, I think I'm going to try this blog thing. I think I'm going to see if I'm still interested in these people, if this is still interesting to me. I know my work was interesting and I know what happened to me that was the catalyst for me starting a nonprofit. but what are the other 1.6 million people's stories? Because there's a moment that happens to everyone in this work. You don't just wake up and say, I'm going to start a nonprofit. Something happens. And I was a woman on a mission to find that out. And the more people I interviewed, the more I wanted to know. And 10 years later, I'm still hungry for those stories and I still love sharing them.
Share with all the writers out there, as many writers are inspiring writers and have a lot of good ideas and going through a writer's guild and has the ambition to go out and try to do something. Take us back to when you were first beginning your writer's journey and starting the blog. What was that like?
Well, I had a really fantastic neighbor named David Nichols, and he wrote for Cheers and Evening Shade, and he was a really well-known television writer. And I called David and I said, David, I have this idea for a TV show. And I said, how do I do this? And what do I do? And I write, but I'm not a writer. So he gave me some just great advice about just kind of writing every day, which is also kind of what connected with the blog. And once upon a time, Charity Matters was daily. I wrote 5 days a week for a long time. So he just talked to me about the process of writing daily, practicing your craft, how to work with the Writers Guild, which, by the way, that website, the WGA, has a lot of great information for anyone writers. It's very self-explanatory how to protect your work. And so that's kind of how I started.
Was there any stories early on that really stood out to you, and kind of as you're writing stories every day and kind of finding and kind of looking at the landscape of stories, was there any that really you were like, whoa, this is really powerful work, and kind of kept you moving forward?
There's in a decade, I was saying earlier, I've written over 2,000 posts. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of interviews, and people will say, what's your favorite? Or I hate saying favorites, like having a favorite child, because all the work is so good. All the stories are amazing. But I will say most of the common thread with almost all of them is the loss. There's always loss. And it is like a hero. What happened to a hero? What happened to them? They had adversity. They had a challenge. They had a loss. Everyone in our lives, we all run into loss and challenge. You don't get through life without having loss. But what you do with it is the difference. And these people that start nonprofits, they take that loss and they use it as fuel for good and fuel for change. And it doesn't matter if they had someone that they loved or it was them that had cancer and they want to start a cancer nonprofit. You know, someone was raped, someone was starving, someone met somebody. There's a million reasons that trigger it, but I'm always fascinated by how they take their loss. All of them. I mean, I could list people who've lost children and what they've done with that. And there's so many. I mean, I did one last night. I revisited one last night that I need to connect you to. But a new friend of mine he's kind of been the one that's haunting me recently. Kevin Adler of Miracle Messages. I don't know if you've met Kevin, but for anyone listening, you should definitely listen to that episode. Kevin, I love the conversations that I have because they make me look at things differently. And I think things like homelessness, especially in California and Pacific Northwest, you can become apathetic to something and you can just not look at it. You can just choose to not look at something or not think about something. And I had this conversation with Kevin, and he made me look at it homelessness completely differently. He reconnects families with the homeless people on the street through Miracle Messages. And he calls them his unhoused neighbors. They're not homeless. They're unhoused neighbors. And he said it's a long story that I won't go into, but he did a GoPro experiment with a group of homeless, and they wore GoPros for a month. And he learned, and what started his nonprofit was, one of the homeless men said, "Oh, I wasn't homeless when I lost my house. I wasn't homeless when I lost my job, when I lost my family, when I lost my friends, when I lost all my human connections, when I became invisible. That's when I became homeless." And he wanted to change that. And the way in which he's reuniting people with having phone buddies. So you can have a phone buddy and you can phone your person, your unhoused neighbor, and you have a standing call with them, every week. It could be Betty in Iowa talking to, Fred in San Diego. But every week, Betty then says, "Hey, Fred, my neighbor's coming to San Diego and she's going to come bring you cookies. And then next thing you know, the neighbor says, hey, Fred, my cousin lives here in San Diego and is looking for some help. Hey, Fred, my cousin's, now got a neighbor. And before you know it, Betty from Iowa has built a community around Fred in San Diego. And Fred now has people that are supporting for him and cheering him on. And what they're doing at Miracle Messages and the way that they're looking at homelessness from building a personal infrastructure. It's not about money. It's not about houses. It's about human connection and building that human support system around a person is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one that's like right in the forefront right now, but there's so many. There's so many.
Yeah. And on the note of loss and responding to loss, you had loss in your family. Would you be willing to share kind of what that experience was like,
Sure.
and then how you personally responded to that time in your life?
Yeah. So all my stories are long, so I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. But my parents in 2002, 4 couples were on vacation in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Best friends, 60 years old, on a trip, empty nesters, super happy. And they were hit by a bus, a German tour bus hit them. And every couple lost a spouse, 3 dead and 1 physically and mentally impaired. So every couple technically lost a spouse. My mother was killed instantly. My dad was in a coma, broken back, broken legs, punctured lung. Died a couple times. My dad's great. We spin 3 times a week. He's fantastic in 82. So this happened. It was that phone call in the middle of the night that you just can't believe, that everyone kind of warns you about. And the grief was unbelievable. I was 35 at the time. And my dad came home after that accident on Thanksgiving Day of 2002. And almost a year to the day, the following November 2002, I got a phone call from a friend who happens to be a priest at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. And he says, Heidi, I'm the only chaplain here. And we have almost 300,000 kids that come through the doors each year. And I'm doing parish duties, at nights and weekends, and I'm here 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And I can't meet a helicopter. I can't do last rites. I can't do a baptism. I can't hold a family's hands before surgery. Can you help me? And I said, oh my God, I've got nothing, John. Like, I'm grieving. I've got 3 little kids. I'm philanthropic, but what do you want? He's like, I want to start a nonprofit that provides chaplains at the hospital. I said, oh, I know nothing about this. He's like, Heidi, I think you can help me. And so I brought a bunch of friends down to the hospital with him and said, okay, we'll come take a tour. So we're taking a tour in the hospital and we run into this woman and she's pushing her son through the hospital and she's running to Father John. And he says, whoa, these are my friends. And she says, do you know what this man did for me? And begins telling us her story about taking her son to school, single mom in LA, and he was run over in the carpool lane at drop-off. Helivac to CHLA, where Father John greeted the helicopter. And Father John sat with her every day. He sat with her for 8 hours of that surgery. He wasn't supposed to survive, and he did. And he came every single day for a month. And she said, Father John was my lifeline. But Father John, I need to tell you, my son's going home on Thanksgiving Day. And that was my light bulb, my lightning bolt, my mother, God, spirit, light, whatever you want to call it. It was the moment that I was called to do this work. And every single person I've interviewed could tell you their moment. And I knew right then, I didn't know what I was doing. Every single nonprofit founder didn't know what they were doing either.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew somehow we were going to start a nonprofit that provided chaplains of all faiths at CHLA and $10 million interfaith center, 37 chaplains, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We changed the culture of a 105-year-old institution. And there you go.
Amazing. With the chaplain and kind of spiritual aspect, what's been your spiritual journey like and how has it played a role in your work?
That's a great question. For me, my faith is kind of the bedrock that held me up. When you lose a parent, when you lose someone, when you have such sudden loss, any loss, sudden or not, when you lose someone you love, it's like the bottom is pulled out from underneath you. And your foundation, what holds you up. And for me, my faith really got me through. So when I was called, or whatever you want to call it, this moment that I shared happened, I felt like it was, I knew it was ironic that I'd be providing faith to families in need who are going through loss, right? I was supported so deeply when I lost my mother and my parents' tragedy and everything that was happening with our friends. And then I was in a position to give that back to all these families. It was such a beautiful thing, unexpected and beautiful and miraculous. And it healed me in unimaginable ways, because when you serve other people, you take all of your attention off your grief and yourself. And it's the most healing, restorative thing ever. So my faith has been at bedrock. And now the organization that I run is a Catholic youth leadership organization. And it isn't really about being Catholic, but it's about that faith, that knowing your beliefs and your leadership skills, whatever those beliefs are part of leading. You can't lead unless you serve. And there is a piece of that, of your core beliefs, whatever those are. Mm-hmm. So it's been a big part of my life.
Yeah. And with loss being one of the main kind of things that are woven throughout all of the stories that you have heard, what are some other things that you have heard kind of consistently throughout the last 10 years of interviewing nonprofit leaders and people just doing good work in their community or serving others, and they're in a place of humility and service to other people? What has been another common thread that you've picked up on?
I would say probably 80% of the people I've interviewed have had some sort of loss or a near miss. Oprah would call it an aha moment. But there's also a big percentage of people that have had enormous gratitude. And I think that that's equally as beautiful. It doesn't matter how this work happens as long as it's happening, right? As long as we're serving and taking care of our neighbor and each other, that's really what matters. But I am fascinated with how it comes together and happens. As an entrepreneur, as you are, with Sackcloth, and even as starting a nonprofit, it's starting a business. And these people are entrepreneurs with incredible depth and soul and purpose. And to me, they are angels on earth. But I think with the people with gratitude, I interviewed someone a couple weeks ago called Roots for Boots, Christy Lucas. And she was a school teacher. And she was from a military family, and everyone in her family had served in the military, brothers, uncles, grandparents. She could list so many more. I mean, it was unbelievable. And she said her favorite day at school as a principal was Veterans Day. She just loved it. She loved everything about it. And she realized she really had a calling. She met some veterans that just the VA wasn't supporting them with the tools that they needed. And she's in Pennsylvania. And she thought, you know what? Why I'm helping these kids, I'm an educator, but really, they need me more. And she just turned her life around in a dime and started Roots for Boots, super grassroots. And it's everything. It's a little bit of a food pantry. It's getting all-terrain wheelchairs for these vets that are in the snow and in the East. And it was because she was so grateful for her family, for all they'd sacrificed, for the freedom, for all these things she'd watched her family members do. She wanted to give back and do something to support other people that didn't have that. And it's just the most beautiful story. I mean, how can you not be inspired by someone who does that? It's the hero, right?
Yeah. At the very core of it, it sounds like too, like the majority of the conversations that you have, as do I, are people that have taken action. They've actually done something, which is, it's inspiring, because there's a lot of people that want to do something or have an idea to do something, but it's not that many people that have actually taken action and put in the difficult work and the grind to actually take their idea into reality.
And it's hard. I mean, it's hard work. Doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit or a for-profit business, anything that's successful, it's energy in, energy out. And it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work. And nonprofit founders don't make a lot of money. They don't do it for the money, but they work just as hard, if not harder, because they're so purpose-driven.
Mm-hmm. With all of the nonprofit leaders that you have interviewed, and you've kind of had this like front row seat at a lot of nonprofit work, what are areas that you feel like nonprofits are weak in? And is the model still effective, or has it changed over the years?
Wow, that's a great question. I think at the core, if we were in a business class right now, it's a really messed up business model, right? Because you're relying on the kindness of others to fund your business. That is not a great business model.
It doesn't sound as sustainable as other models.
Correct. So to that point, it's not always a great model. But if you think about our country and you think about how we at our core, whether it was the Pilgrims, we were taking care of each other. We were taking care of our neighbor. We were checking on our neighbor. Our neighbor was sick. We were bringing them food. We were bringing them medicine. We were doing whatever we can. And when I think we are the most philanthropic country in the world, when I think about that, that's who we are as Americans. We take care of each other. And so I think that core piece of who we are is alive and thriving. And I think that is what I would hate to see go away. The things that I see that are more dysfunctional than even the grassroots community piece, I think is alive and well. Because those are the people that always care. Something happened.
And they're innovative.
And they're innovative. And let's just say someone in a small town gets sick with something and they want to raise money to help that person. Everyone in that town knows those people. They rally around and they will do that because that's what we do, right? That's what we do. The bigger they get, I think the less that keeping that core beautiful piece becomes harder. I think it gets more challenging. I am in no way saying that the work that huge nonprofits like Susan G. Komen and the Red Cross do, I mean, they're phenomenal. They do phenomenal work. I'm not saying that at all. But it is different. There's a difference. Where I think things go wrong or where I think things that I see that make me a little sad and frustrated is when the government is involved. And this is not political. This is just a nonprofit fact, is that if you think about institutions run by governments, you're going to go to the DMV or you're going to go to the post office. It's not usually the most efficient, place you're going to go for something, typically.
Yeah. I've never heard of anyone going to the DMV and being like, that was such an incredible experience.
Exactly. So it's kind of the same with government funded nonprofits. There's a DMV quality that happens there and not that quality of that, hey, our neighbor's sick and we're going to take care of her. There's a disconnect. And I really like to support those small grassroots nonprofits because I just believe, I did it myself. I still run a nonprofit that's a grassroots nonprofit. I just believe in that core value of us taking care of our neighbors and our own communities. And I know you and I have discussed this before, how important community is.
Yeah. And to your point, and that's a big, part of this podcast is interviewing people doing grassroots work in their communities because, some of the smallest, most grassroots work and people are the most innovative. They are extremely creative on doing a lot with a little.
You have no choice.
Yeah, you have no choice. And I think some of the best solutions can be birthed out of this ability to have to be creative with the resources that you have.
Right.
And honestly, I've at this point, I'm almost 10 episodes in. And one of the biggest things that I've picked up on so far is that you don't need a lot to do a lot. And that money is not going to ultimately solve our problems. That some of the best ideas, some of these grassroots organizations, there's amazing case studies so far that I'm finding that they're sometimes serving more people than some of these large nonprofits. And it's pretty fascinating to watch. I'm cheering them on.
I mean, the nonprofit, the youth leadership organization that I run, Task, we serve 3,000 kids a year and we have 2.5 employees. 3,000 kids. We train college kids on leadership. They train the high school kids. The high school kids teach the middle school kids. We have 2.5 employees. We are as lean and skinny as a nonprofit can be, but we are incredibly impactful. And the reason I do this work and I walk the walk for the people that I interview is because A, I love being in the space, but B, I'm planting the seed of compassion in 3,000 kids a year and teaching them how to serve. That you can't be a leader unless you serve other people. And service is at the core of what we do at nonprofits, and creating community is the core of what we do. And that's the thing that I love and treasure and value about this work. And I think that's what makes this country great, makes this work so great, makes these people so amazing, is because they care and they act and they're passionate. And at the end, they just want to help.
With all of the work that you've done personally, the grassroots work through this organization, where do you feel like we're at right now in the United States, and talking with other leaders who are doing work with the youth? Where do you feel like we're at right now in regards to caring for the youth in our communities and in our country overall? Like, what's your perspective as somebody who's actively involved in it right now?
Oh, I have to say, we did not stop during COVID. We brought our programs online. I ever tried to run a camp online? We sent Camp in a Box to thousands of kids via Zoom, but we kept going. And what we do is peer-to-peer. So kids always want to be with a cooler older kid. So that's why the older kids always teach younger kids, and it's so amazing and effective. But I've seen the mental health crisis. I mean, when I turned on the screen the first day we did camp during COVID, and I just saw these hollow faces looking up, it was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking. We've been doing a lot more mental health stuff. They call it socio-emotional learning, whatever you want to call it. We call it checking in with the weather. We did something this year with our kids during the school year where we partnered with a nonprofit called the Kindness Campaign. And the kids, the curriculum, they wrote a song. They got together and created a band name, an album cover, and draw their album cover. And then they had to, with prompted questions, they had to talk about how they felt, how they were feeling. But they were giving us lyrics for a song. And then we gave those lyrics through to the Kindness Campaign, who hired musicians, out-of-work musicians in Austin, Texas, who produced actual songs. And we gave these kids their song back. And these kids, I'm going to share them with you later. These songs are unbelievable. And so giving kids a place to come together, to be in a safe place, and to talk about how they're feeling, to validate them, to listen to them. We've always done that, but our work's never been more important than right now. These kids are suffering.
With all the people listening that might want to start a nonprofit or start a grassroots organization or has an idea to do something, what would you say to them right now?
Oh, I get asked that question a lot. There are in Los Angeles, I think we have about 45, 50,000 nonprofits. The number changes a lot. We have 1.6 million nationally. I would never say never to an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are going to do what they're going to do. And if someone told me not to, I would never want to say, if someone said, don't start Tesla, I'm sure, like to Elon, so I would never say no, but I would say for sure, get involved and go and work. If you want to be a part of something, whether it's hunger or cancer or health, or find someone that's doing that, volunteer. They always need volunteers. Work for them. Go to catchafire.org, which is a fantastic organization that's kind of high-end. If you're, a marketing person, you can create a marketing plan for a nonprofit. You can do high-end volunteering. Mm-hmm. Go to, volunteer.org and type in your zip code and find the nonprofits in your space. You say you're interested in this. It's basically like dating match, and they'll match you with a nonprofit based on your interest in your area to volunteer. But definitely work and look at the space. If you're going to start a business, I tell you the same thing. Who's your competition? Who's doing it right? Who's doing a great job? What are they doing? What do they do that makes them unique? What's going to set you apart? What's your niche? It's all the things that you would ask any entrepreneur student. My husband has an MBA in entrepreneurship, and he laughs that he got the MBA and I'm the entrepreneur. But those are the basic questions that you would ask anyone starting a business. You started a business, it's the same thing. And a nonprofit's the exact same, except your financial model is, and then who do you know who's going to support this? What is that? Because that's your job as a nonprofit founder, is to create community, to find people who believe in you or your mission, hopefully both, and that will support you in this. And that is, you're the Pied Piper. You can need everyone to start, rallying around you. So there's a lot of pieces that go into it.
This is more of a fun question because it's probably a little unrealistic, but because of how busy you are, you're running a nonprofit, you have Charity Matters, you got a lot going on. That's more than what most people are willing to commit to. If all of that was set aside, what would be the thing that you would start next?
Oh, I love that you know that I would start something.
I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You always got something. You got a list of things in your phone, I'm sure.
Well, we're working on the TV show, so that's definitely happening. You know what I always think, what I really believe what I've learned to believe over the years, what I think my purpose on this planet is to be a messenger of service. I'm a messenger. Yes, I am doing the work too, but my gift is that I'm a communicator and a messenger. So I really don't want to stand on the corner with a sandwich board or do something like that. That's not the way I want to deliver a message. But I always ask myself, what's the next venue to deliver this message? Is it a book? I think I'd probably write a book. And books on my list. You've done the TED Talk. Kind of thought about that, but I don't know. How can I get people to listen, right? How do I get people to understand the importance of serving and service and how enriched their lives will be from helping somebody else? And so whatever that platform would be for the next avenue to be a messenger is what I would do.
If your whole thing is, it sounds like you just choose a different medium to share messages and stories.
Right.
In your opinion, what makes a good story? Like what is something that's really important for you to make sure that you find within a story?
You know, I think for me, that adversity, to me, the story is overcoming the challenge. There is always a roadblock, a challenge, a setback, a loss. There's something that seemed impossible, that was so devastating that you could never come out of it. And to see the way that people work through adversity, that they take it and they use it as fuel, and then they do so much good in the process. To me, those are the best stories. They're just absolutely the best stories. And what I love about our heroes is they don't think they're heroes. And most of them, and I'm sure you're learning this even in 10 in, they don't want to necessarily be interviewed. They don't want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about their work. It's not about them, but it is about them. And it's not, I tell all of them, it's not the power of one, because there's no nonprofit that was been built or organization built by one person ever. It's always a community that helps support us in everything we do, whether you're building this podcast, whether you're building a company. No one has done anything successfully alone. No one. But I tell them, if you share the story, your power through the lens of power of one, which is kind of the lens which I tell it through their journey, their entrepreneurial journey of starting a nonprofit, people can see themselves in that. And it gives them hope that they could get through, or they could do something and they could overcome a loss. And that's really what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, it's become a common theme just in this conversation alone with your personal story, and the common thread amongst all the stories that you've been able to hear over the years is, would it be safe to say that everyone faces adversity at some point in their life, and everyone has an opportunity to do something with that adversity, to turn it into some sort of a positive opportunity to help others and to be there for others, or to be more compassionate on others?
100%. I mean, we all have gifts, and it's just how we use them. And I think when people say, well, I don't know how to start, or I don't know how to get involved, or I don't know what to do. Well, what do you love? Like, what do you love? Do you love to play the piano? Do you love to sing? Go to a retirement home and sing and play the piano. I mean, what do you love to do, and how can you share that gift with the world?
Yeah, I always share, like, anytime I'm speaking at somewhere and we're kind of talking about finding your purpose or finding what is it that you're supposed to do? I always say answer 2 questions. The first question is most commonly asked, what brings you joy? What is the craft that you have? That's the question that wakes you up in the morning. The second question rarely gets asked, and that's, what injustice do you absolutely hate? And that's the question that might be connected to, your childhood, or something that's happened during your life, or something that you've seen in society that really frustrates you. It's the question that causes you to lose sleep at night. And when you can do what brings you joy to bring relief to the injustice that you hate, that's when you've discovered your purpose. You can be really successful in doing your craft well and building a career and being successful in that, but not bringing any relief to the injustice that you hate. There's still a disconnection in how you feel and your purpose and your personal story.
I completely agree. So we tell our kids when they come to our summer program, when they come to our camp, we tell them about magis, which is the Latin word for more. And we tell them teach them about magis, teaching to find your more. But what is that fire in your belly? What is that thing do you have an aunt that had breast cancer and you were knitting her a cap? What is that thing? Did you have a homeless person living behind your home and that you saw that without food? What is that thing that just makes you so upset that you need to act, that you care so deeply? We tell this to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they've started nonprofits. I mean, you wouldn't believe the things these kids do, but it's exactly that message. And it doesn't matter how old you are to hear that message. And I think it's so important. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I got to share it a few weeks ago with a graduating class of seniors. And I just so happened to be sharing with them over Zoom. There's probably like 40 or 50 of them on their last day of their senior year. And it was just one of those unique moments that you're like, wow, like I get this kind of like very unique space of time where I get to share with people that are graduating high school and this is their last day and they're entering into a completely new phase in their life. And I got to share that, like you've been told growing up, like, be successful in your college and your career and all these things, but that's just half of it. You got to find a way to be connected to what you're supposed to do on a deeper level, which is how can you make a difference in the world? And they all got it. I think the youth really understands it because a lot of the youth have gone through very difficult things. And I think that they're already connected to that adversity in their life and they're pulling from that.
I agree. And I also think that this group of kids, and I've been working with high school, college, and middle school kids for 9 years. This group of kids, they're kind of activists, right? They really have that fire. They've seen a lot of things happen in their life, to your point, and they really definitely have that. I did a commencement speech a few years ago, and that was like the hardest thing I'd ever. I do a lot of public speaking as well, but a commencement speech for me, that was at my alma mater. That was a doozy. That was a doozy.
I bet.
Oh my gosh.
Who's somebody that has inspired you over the years?
Oh my gosh. I think every nonprofit founder that I've interviewed inspires me. It is a guilty pleasure, I will say. I mean, I have a very full life, just managing everything that I do. And sometimes it's, I think, oh gosh, how am I going to fit this conversation in, or how is this going to happen? And I have never once hung up with a conversation with someone who started a nonprofit and not had my life be enriched by their lesson, their life, their journey, their service. It's like I get slapped in the face every week, like, wake up, Heidi, this is what's important. Sometimes we get caught up in our stuff and we're running around saying, I can't make it to this meeting and I've got to be here and I have this report due and what, and all of a sudden, boom, someone's telling you how short life is. Someone's telling you how precious, their time is, what they've been able to do, how they've reconnected a homeless person with their family, or, just the life lessons that people have shared with me are going to be the book. They will be the book because there are so many great ones, but it just makes me pause and refocus on what really matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited for everyone listening to this. Check out Charity Matters podcast. They're beautiful stories. You do such a wonderful job. It was intimidating interviewing you because of how incredible you are. Seriously.
Thank you.
Last question I'll ask is a question I always finish on, which is why local? Why do you feel like giving back on a local level matters?
I think to what I said earlier about who we are and taking care of our neighbor, I think that is who we are. Even when COVID hit, what did we all do? We checked on our neighbors. When was the last time we checked on our neighbors? We hadn't. If there's an earthquake in California, first thing you do, you check on your neighbor. And we need to be doing that, not because of an earthquake, not because of a once in 100-year pandemic. We need to be checking on our neighbors every day, all the time, every week, because that's who we are. And I think local and community is about taking care of each other. And at the core, I think that's who we are. That's the best of us. And I think we need to continue that in our lives.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Love Your City podcast. If you want to find ways to get involved in your community, you can visit loveyourcity.org. If you have any questions or recommendations of grassroots leaders or nonprofits that we should be aware of, email us at media@levycity.org.